Uh, Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are on the planet. My name is JJ Sutherland. I'm the CEO of Scrum Inc, and I'm joined here by my father, Jeff Sutherland, to have this sort of fireside chat today that we thought we would hold before the end of the year. Just a couple of pieces of housekeeping. This is being recorded, and you will get a link to that recording after in the post-webinar email. And we will, be posting it in public places. So we want to sort of, as I said, sort of close out the year and talking about Scrum at scale and scaled implementations of Agile. And so I wanted to sort of begin there. And one of the things that we keep on hitting over and over is no one actually cares how well you do Agile. They care about business outcomes, right? Right, Dan?
Yes, absolutely. When you're talking about Agile transformations of organizations, you're talking about the senior management meeting their objectives, which have nothing to do about Agile. They have to do about satisfying the board, their financial objectives, usually a report card that has multiple aspects. And one of the biggest challenges is for our Agile coaches and trainers to actually respond directly to the senior management dashboard, showing significant benefits from the Agile transformation.
Yeah, I mean, one of our large clients, John Deere, actually sort of, when they were going through their Agile transformation, they started out as like, we want speed to outcomes. And they said, well, how are we going to do that? And the three metrics they chose, and I really like these metrics because they both are great for external and for stakeholders, but also for the teams. The first one was speed to awareness or speed to knowledge. How fast do they know stuff? Then was speed to decision making. How fast, once they have that awareness, how fast can they make a decision with it? And then it's speed to execution. And Dad, we were talking about this the other day, and you said, well, that's the OODA loop, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. In my new book, First Principles in Scrum, which I actually started writing to help create the second edition of the Red Book, Scrum, the Art of Twice the Work in Half the Time, which it's at the publishers, right? And it's coming out in March.
Coming out March 26th, the 10th anniversary edition.
So one of the things I spent a whole chapter thinking through, how can we get Agile coach trainers, Scrum masters, talking about metrics that mean something to the senior management, the board, the organization. And it was interesting, as I drilled down, it all came down to the OODA loop. How fast can you observe what's going on? How fast can you orient yourself by pre-prioritizing the backlog? How fast can you decide on something, and then how fast can you actually execute? That's the OODA loop. And basically, John Deere has the OODA loop as their mission statement, and objectives and measurements. This is the thing to measure.
And it was interesting when I was speaking with Jeff Johnson, the person who used Scrum at the Sentinel project at the FBI, and he actually said speed to awareness was one of his key things. And it was, okay, how long does it take for an FBI agent to sort of put in, okay, I interviewed this person, and here's what it is, that everyone else in the FBI has access to it. And what I really liked about that was, as I was saying, is you could say to the director of the FBI, hey, we're measuring this, and we can show you how long that takes. But then you're also talking to the team, the person who's actually designing the user interface to put it. It's like, if that's what they want, how fast can I get this across the FBI? That puts a team level focus and able to do it. And I think that the things that really get in people's way of doing this, and we talk about this all the time, but especially at Scrum at scale, at the organizational level, this is kind of different, is the things, we talk about this, the mega issues. And the first one of those is talking about priority. And priority at the team level, hey, that's the product owner, go for it. That's at one level, fairly simple. But at the organizational level, it can be more complex, right, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most interesting examples was at 3M and their healthcare division a few years ago. The chief executive decided she become the chief product owner. And she told me she was going to change the management of all the business units and get the right person in place. So each business unit management was a chief product owner for their set of products. And then she had a meta scrum meeting twice a week, I think on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And one Thursday, 6 weeks before the end of the quarter, they discovered they were not going to meet their quarterly income that was going to be reported to Wall Street. And on Thursday morning, they changed the backlog of hundreds of teams so that entering their next 1 week sprint on Monday, everything was changed and they nailed their quarterly report to Wall Street. So that shows you the power of the meta scrum, of Scrum at Scale, and getting the right people in place as a chief product owner team.
And I think when you're talking about prioritization, it's sort of across the organization, that then getting to those outcomes. Agility sort of is in service to driving those outcomes, but there's sort of an organizational enterprise level agility, and then there's team level agility. And those are different. And Scrum at Scale is at that enterprise level agility. Like one organization we're working with is the Royal Navy. And I'm going to talk about this because we wrote about it in our new book that comes out in the spring, the 10th anniversary edition, where one of the things is, of course, the Royal Navy is doing a bunch of things. They have a bunch of different, what they call directorates, and all these people are in charge of them. And what the thing was is, how do you get a priority that needs to go across a bunch of different directorates to actually get to done? And one of them might have, okay, that's priority 1, and the next one, but in that directorate, but it's priority 8, and the other one at 3, and so they don't have this sort of unified sense of prioritization.
Yeah.
And what really helps in Scrum at Scale is setting up that meta scrum, the team of product owners getting together on a regular cadence and talking it through. How are we going to get, the top level, priorities that we need to accomplish as a large organization, and do that. And you know what? Some of the teams underneath them use Scrum, some of them don't. But just having that meta scrum, having that very high level prioritization mechanism has allowed them to really drive and get the priorities across the organization. I think that's really and it's really forcing those people to have a conversation and make those prioritization trade-offs.
Yeah, as one of the organizations that I work with, the leader is very well known in the industry, Ivor Jacobson. He runs the biggest SAFE organization in Europe. And when he started looking at Scrum at Scale, and we started implementing cards to run Scrum at Scale, he said, this is an executive management system for our organizations. We're going to use it everywhere, and we can use it to manage. Some of our organizations are doing SAFE in one place, less in another, Scrum at Scale in another. It doesn't matter. Scrum at Scale gets the organization agile and manages the organizational agility in a way that no other framework can do.
And the other thing is, that organizational agility, that in these getting these product owners or these senior leaders to really be customer focused, to obsess about the customer, and have that drive their prioritization. I just think that is so important. And then sort of the next sort of one I want to talk about is delivery, which is, how fast, again, you have your decision making, which happens at the prioritization level, but how fast can your organization deliver? And that's really interesting at the enterprise level. I want to get your thoughts on this, Dad, is that one of the things that I've found in our clients this year in particular, obviously, we've both been talking to leaders across the world for the new books, and it's that they're really learning what it is of their organization's capacity to deliver. And sort of very much like almost at the team level Scrum, you don't want to overload a team. By the Scrum at Scale, getting it visible, not only what the prioritization is, but what actually gets done.
Right. Well, one of the most interesting things about Scrum at Scale, and actually the implementation here that you mentioned, is that you look at where in the organization in the flow of product, is there a bottleneck? And that's where you focus first. And what John Deere said was the supply chain is our bottleneck. So, our IT group is doing Scrum and they're kind of slow, but we're not going to worry about them right now. We're going to focus on the supply chain.
Yeah, and the supply chain digital solutions, which was sort of enabling their entire supply chain operation.
And I was amazed when you interviewed them again and wrote the chapter in the book about them, that they actually saw that there was going to be a chip shortage. And they said, okay, the top priority for us is to actually buy chips. So when there's a chip shortage, we actually can sell chips to our suppliers so they can make our circuit boards.
Yeah, so they were able to.
Yeah. So as a result, they had no chip shortage and they took market share from all the other vendors and their stock price went up 400%.
Yeah, no, it's really. Yeah.
Talk about delivering twice the value for half the cost. I mean, John Deere nailed it, right? during the chip shortage.
and that goes to sort of one of the things about delivery, which is, and what that sort of other thing that John Deere was talking about, is the speed to decision making. And there's a lot of really good data that shows that the slower those decisions are made, the far greater it is you're not going to have good outcomes. And so just like that, and focusing on that speed as I think about this year, and talking to these senior leaders, focusing on how fast can they make decisions about prioritization, about what they're going to deliver, how fast they can deliver. This is just an incredibly important part of doing it, and it slows everything down. It's amazing sometimes when it's like, okay, well, we're going to send emails back and forth between 10 senior leaders who all talk to each other in different places, but they never actually get all in the same room at the same time to talk about what's actually happening in the organization. And that's what delays it. It's just getting the right people in the room.
Yeah. Well, a couple of years ago, I mean, this decision latency thing was really hit on by the Standish Group. When the CEO of the Standish said, Jeff, let's have coffee. I want to show you our latest chaos report, because we've done a big data analysis on millions of projects, trying to find out what is the one data point that's most important for project success. And he says, we found it, and it is time to make a decision latency. That is the number one data point that tells you the probability of your success of your Agile implementation. So the fact that John Deere has made that kind of a centerpiece of their corporate metrics really makes a lot of sense, because that's the way it is.
I remember one thing you said to me when I became CEO of Scrum Inc, because you said, listen, you got to make a lot of decisions, and half of your decisions are going to be wrong, but you don't know which half. So deliver stuff and then learn from that.
Yeah, right. That gets back to the first principles in Scrum. The book goes all the way back to physics. And the most interesting thing that's happened in physics in the last couple of decades is actually Wolfram's physics project. Wolfram is a genius that created Mathematica, which is the leading simulation tool for mathematicians and physicists. And their physics project tries to simulate the universe, reality. And what they found out was the first principle of that simulation is you can't predict what is going to happen. The actual simulation has to run all the way to the end before you know the end result, because it is so complicated what is happening. You would need infinite computing power to actually calculate the result ahead of time. So this is computational irreducibility, and it's basically a law like gravity. You can jump off a cliff, but you're going to get hurt. You can do traditional project management, but you're going to get hurt. It's against the law of the universe, right? So this translates, and what you just said, JJ, half your decisions are going to be wrong. This goes back to Taiichi Ohno's book about managing projects at Toyota. In the first chapter, he says to his project leaders, you have to understand that half of what you think is wrong. And your major objective every day is to come in and try to figure out which half is wrong. And when you find out what's wrong, you need to confess to the people that you were wrong, and then they will trust you. And he says, also need to know that whatever the team says, half of that's going to be right. He said, I spent years at Toyota, and we're always making process improvements. And I've said, let's try this new thing. And they would say to me, we tried that 10 years ago and it didn't work. And he said, well, we're going to try it again. And it would work. So he says, I learned half of what these engineers think is wrong. And if you think as a project manager, you're smarter than these engineers at Toyota, you are on something that you're smoking in the back room, right? Half of what everybody thinks is wrong. And our job every day is to figure out how to correct our thinking and how to affirm people that are right, because half of the time they're right. And if you do that, people will follow you anywhere. So Taiichi Ohno is just articulating a law of computational irreducibility. You just can't know when the project's going to be done.
And and the regular delivery, giving you that feedback, and you can't get that feedback unless you can deliver, is what allows you to learn like if you're wrong. And I think that at the enterprise level, one of the things we encourage, like in a scaled environment, is you need to be able to encourage people down below you to make decisions, teams, the people who are closest to doing the work, because they make it fastest and they know the most. But you also want to say, they can be wrong too. Of course they're going to be wrong. They're going to make mistakes. And one of the things we talk about is most decisions, even at the team level, are things you can make that are somewhat trivial. And we say, so imagine a boat, right? There are certain decisions that if you really get them wrong, it's above the waterline, and you can react and you can fix it. And there are decisions that are below the waterline that'll sink the boat if you really mess it up. But you need to know the difference. So, because not all decisions need to be considered really, really, really carefully. Yeah. A lot of them can be done, and the mistakes can happen.
Well, one of the chapter I'm just finishing up for my new book is called Lessons in Chemistry. Maybe some of you have watched the TV show Lessons in Chemistry. It's about this woman who partners up with a brilliant scientist. Her name is Elizabeth Sott in the Apple TV series.
Enough to see that.
What's that?
You're breaking up a little bit, so why don't you start up? Lessons in Chemistry. And
in there, as I write a chapter on that, everything you need to know about Scrum and Agile, you can learn in the chemistry lab. And one of the things you learn is every experiment is unpredictable. But when the experiment is done, you can actually trace back to the beginning and see the links. And in the world of Agile, we see these patterns of behavior. And so in Scrum at Scale, we have embedded in Scrum at Scale, and we teach in Scrum at Scale these patterns, which we've also published in the patterns book, the Scrum book, The Spirit of the Game. Scrum at Scale itself is based on patterns. So even though things are unpredictable, we can generally look at what's happened and do some anticipation through these patterns. And they're extremely useful at keeping us on the road. And it was fascinating to me that in the chemistry lab, that's what they're looking for. And we need to be as sharp in our thinking about Agile practice as they are in the chemistry lab, looking at everything that's happening, tying it back to root cause, and then seeing the common patterns and implementing them. And it needs to be done, as you mentioned, at the team level. Teams need to understand these.
And so what it reminded me of what you just said and sort of the irreducibility is, as a journalist, I was a journalist for many years and looking back sort of at historical events. And it's like everyone sort of sees when they, do the, look back, they say, oh, it was, predetermined that this is going to happen this way. And of course, there'd be an American Republic. Of course, Napoleon would lose. Of course, the Nazis would lose, whatever. And you look back at it and you're like, ooh, it could have gone a bunch of different ways.
Absolutely.
And some of the way we got now is not necessarily the likely way that someone would have thought of it.
Absolutely.
And it's all that, but you can only figure that about looking back. You can't figure it out ahead of time. And how quickly can you get that information?
Yeah, Professor Takeuchi, one of our mentors, the original paper, Takeuchi and Anaka, the new product development game. We meet with Takeuchi regularly. Even today, he lives near me. And he has a course at Harvard Business School where he deconstructs all the case studies at Harvard Business School. Because you read a case study, it sounds like this company became great because it was predictable. But if you actually look what happened when they were a startup, they were inspecting and adapting like crazy and trying many different things, most of which failed. And out of that emerged what they are today. So he's teaching in his class that the companies weren't great because of the reasons of the case study. They were great because they used Scrum to get going, and through inspecting and adapting, they figured out what worked.
So we just got a question, I think, what are your thoughts on organizations that try to scale it before they've nailed it? And actually reminds us sort of going into the next sort of mega issue, which is structure. And what reminded me of is a few years back, there was this 3M merger. They bought this company, Scott Safety, $2.5 billion merger, a lot of money. And so they had them, and if you do a big merger, you need a lot of input from across the organization, from legal, from manufacturing, R&D, IT, security, all these different things. And what they did was they said, well, we're going to do the merger doing Scrum, but it's not like all of the people below each one of those groups were Agile. So like the legal teams weren't, and a bunch of Scrum teams doing sprints. IT was, R&D was, but manufacturing wasn't. But it's sort of, as we were talking about similarly with the Royal Navy, is they got those people together and said, we need transparency and prioritization so we know we can make decisions. But one of the lawyers involved was, when I was interviewing about this, he said that, he said, listen, I'm a corporate lawyer at 3M. I've got like 50 lawyers who work for me, and that's just one part of our legal department. And, we get, requests, lawsuits, opinions, all this kind of stuff. We get thousands of those all the time. And he says, but it's very hard for me to figure out what's important unless there's like a big dollar figure attached.
Yeah.
And he said, but having that Metascrum, having that, okay, all these, product owners, for lack of a better word, but, he wasn't necessarily a product owner. He was just the empowered representative of legal in this merger Metascrum. And he said, and they had transparent backlogs. And they could see, he says, oh, wow, now I see if I don't get you that legal opinion next sprint, it's going to freeze security and they can't make any movement. And so I would say and as I was talking about earlier, there's the team level Scrum, which is awesome. That's how teams deliver, and they deliver better. But there's the enterprise Scrum at scale agility, which you can put into basically any structure. It's just this communication structure that allows prioritization to go down to the team levels, and that allows impediments to get raised. So don't wait until you're perfectly doing Scrum.
Yeah, the legal example you gave is a great example, because in the second application of what the prototypes of Scrum at scale, before we formalized it, was actually at IDX Systems, which got acquired by General Electric. And we had hundreds of Scrum teams. But the CEO had the backlog of the company, and he said to the head of the legal department, if your contracting or any legal issues block any high priority items in our Metascrum, I'm going to get another lawyer. So the whole legal department had to scrum the product backlog of the company coming out of the meta scrum. And that made our stock price go up. I mean, our stock price would regularly keep going up. And Gartner Group kept on saying, what are these guys doing? You know, all of a sudden, they're making the right decisions. They're making money. The products are better. The customers are happier. The legal guys are actually helping close deals. Okay. So yeah, all of this is really important to organizational agility.
And the other sort of thing that we really look at is how easy is it for your organization to respond to change in structure? And like, how easy, okay, there's something that happens in the market, in the world, and whatever, how easy it is for you to change the backlog of a bunch of teams to have them address this new issue. And we've certainly seen that over the past few years, that things happen and companies really have to respond fast.
Right.
And the ability to do that in an agile way is critical. And so when you're looking at your organization, how easy is it for you to change your mind and steer your organization another way?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that is really hard in talking to organizational leaders is to convince them of the urgency that we're talking about. And let me give you an example. This week, Volkswagen is cutting $10 billion of cost out of the company. Why? Because Tesla can make 20 hardware software changes in the cars per week as the cars are moving down the assembly line. And they can produce a car, it's going to order of magnitude faster than Volkswagen. And it's because even though Volkswagen has implemented a lot of Scrum, we've had a lot of trainers in there, they haven't attained organizational agility. And one of their previous CEOs was focused on that, and he got fired because he was causing trouble, right? So now they're taking a $10 billion hit, and that is the first of the billions they are going to have to cut. So one of the message I want to say when we're talking about Scrum at Scale is that this is not just talk for fun. This is actually life and death for your organization. And the speed of things is increasing rapidly. And AI is accelerating that change by an order of magnitude. That's another thing that I'm having trouble explaining to people. You thought you were in trouble last year. With the advent of AI, you are in 10 times as much trouble today. And if you don't wake up and start to make major changes in agility, you're going to be left behind. And it's not going to be fun. And particularly for many of our constituency are software developers, millions of them all over the world. And a lot of them are getting laid off because their organizations are not productive enough. Now, half of that is because the organization is not agile. But the other half is that they, as individual software developers, if you're using Copilot, it generates 80% of your code. I'm even programming again. I created a great new software tool for my healthcare company this week, and I've got my web team putting it up. I didn't know, I never wrote a line of PHP code in my life, but I said to Chad, I got this Ruby program that's really cool, but I need everybody in the world to get it. Make me a PHP program I can put on my website. Boom. There it was. Then I put it in, it had error messages. I said, hey, chat, you made these errors, fix them. And it did. Within an hour, I had a new software tool for my users all over the world, up on the web. That would have taken me weeks for my software development team to get right and get loaded.
And so
People,
yeah,
it's fast.
in a
It's fast and it's getting
environment,
faster.
you need to have an organization. The Scrum Scale allows you because things are going to change fast.
Absolutely.
And you have to be prepared as an organization. And I think what we've really been talking about this hour is that not so much at the Scrum team level, but at an organizational level, what your organization is capable of doing.
Yeah.
And this, we're talking about structure right now and how you structure your organization is really going to be impacted by AI. And you have to figure out how you're going to adjust. And it's going to adjust very quickly. It's going to change very quickly.
Right.
I just have someone in the chat saying they lost their government contract because they couldn't provide an AI solution to the problem.
Right. There you
And
go.
so like, wow, you got to change your backlog quickly.
That should ring an alarm bell to everyone listening. That's an alarm, right?
Yeah.
Lost a major contract because no AI solution.
So I want to turn to the sort of final of the mega issues. There's a culture and mindset. And I was talking to someone, and so it's in the new edition of the book. We talk about, he goes, the Ministry of Defense in the UK. He said, listen, our mission is great. People should be skipping to work. This is like a Marine general telling me this. We should be skipping to work because like we're defending the nation. I mean, this is important stuff. And he says, instead, you go into this bureaucratic sort of soul-crushing organization, and which is structured the wrong way and which drives behavior. And he's sort of like, how do we change that mindset and that culture to be one that people are excited to come in and go for that mission? A lot of that is structure. People's behaviors come out of structure, but there's this mindset, this agile mindset of saying, if people aren't skipping to work, we're doing something wrong. You talk a lot about this. You said, people aren't happy and having fun, you're doing it wrong.
This reminds me back when we were training GE, they brought us in, you were working with the teams, but I was training all the managers. Basically, we put them through the Scrum Master course, the Product Owner course. And what I told the senior management was, a third of your managers don't want to change. That's just the way it is. They're not going to help. A third of them are going to go along if you tell them what to do, but a third of them are really ready. So the idea with Scrum at Scale is to start with the people who are ready and get them going so fast, it gets other people excited and it pulls more people into the ready state. That needs to be a really core strategy. And what we find when we pull into companies, they're often doing Scrum. They often have had a scaling framework. They say, we have these 300 teams. I mean, this was true at John Deere. It was true at Rocket Mortgage. We have these hundreds of teams, but they're all slow, even though they're agile. What should we do? And if you try to fix them all at once, it's not possible, right? But if you focus on a small group and then you accelerate them, then they get excited. They're skipping into work. And when other people see that, they say, hey, my work is really boring. I want to be skipping into work like those people, right? And so now you get more volunteers and you start to build momentum. And so you really need a strategic mind to actually implement this and actually get it to work culturally. I think we have technical error. JJ, you are frozen.
And one of the things in terms of the culture and mindset, so I was talking to the
Yeah, JJ, you're freezing up. I'll do the best I can. What would your best recommend as the best AI training resource for teams? I've done multiple presentations on Scrum all over the world. And the issue is, not only does the individual developer need to get faster, but the team as a whole. So the tools are just starting to come online now, but I have 2 Scrum teams that I'm managing every day. I'm in daily meetings. I have a startup, and I also have a global web team that runs websites for all my companies. And every meeting is put into Otter AI. So I have a complete transcript. Every transcript is fed into ChatGPT along with all the Jira stuff. And when it comes to the retrospective, we ask Chat, okay, what's going on? What can we do to improve? How can we accelerate faster? And so you want to make AI part of the team. Now, what's happened to Chat right now, they're really bulking it up and now putting not only all the plugins, but they're able to make your own chats. Now you're able to actually easily build tools that are specific to your organization to make AI part of your Scrum team. And that's going to be essential for success of Agile teams in the future.
Absolutely.
Hey,
I'm back, I think. One of the things I was going to say, I think you're spreading out from having great teams, then talk about it, because I think the best change management, yes, you got to send out communications. Yes, you have to be transparent. Yes, the leadership has to do all this stuff. But the best change management is peers talking to other peers saying, this Scrum thing is awesome and you should do it.
Yeah.
And another sort of change management piece that I've heard a couple of leaders use, and they're trying to sort of sell, Agile to other leaders or other people in the organization who are resistant. Yeah. And so this is something you could do when you're talking to leaders. He said, and he says, remember when.
Yeah, it looks like JJ froze up again with about the technical stuff. But you're back online again, JJ?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Sorry about that. But he said, okay, and he said, remember that feeling of being on that great team. He says, well, what if we did that on purpose? Because that happened by accident that you had that great team experience. And what Agile does is, how do we get that on purpose and excite the people?
Yeah, again, I think I've always tried to take a small subset of teams, get them running really great. Now they're a model, build a model for your own organization. It's not about Scrum is great. It's about our teams and our organization are doing awesome things. Look at this. Here's the data. You can talk to the people. They're excited. That is what gets other people excited as well. So
I think that's really, can you hear me at this point? I just turned my camera off to hopefully save bandwidth. So what I think at this point, sort of like this, 4 mega issues that really do drive your organizational agility, your enterprise level agility, as much as your team level agility. And what Scrum Scale does is you can sort of sit it over, any way you're organizing yourself. You can sit it over a safe implementation, as you were talking about. There's a good case study on that we have with Rocket Mortgage on our website. There, but it's priority, delivery, structure, culture, and mindset. And if those are the things that you need to fix at the organizational level, at the enterprise level, to know how you can do it. So now we're about 40 minutes in. So why don't we go to some questions in the Q&A? If I'm just going to ask I
just saw it. What if everything is a priority? You are going to fail.
You don't have priorities.
Either get it fixed or find another company quick. That game is over. It's done.
Yeah, what I always tell people is if you have 10 priorities, you don't have any priorities, and the most junior person in your company is deciding your corporate strategy because they get to pick what to work on.
Yeah, lots of great questions coming furiously. Do you maybe our marketing folks have selected some top level questions that they think are really representative? Could they help us up with this? Because there's thousands of questions in there.
Okay, there's in hosts and panelists.
If I open the Q&A, I see most of what people claim is Agile is pretty bad. Agile. What would you say to an executive who thinks his organization is Agile?
Well, can you deliver?
Yeah,
Can you
it's all about
prioritize?
it's what we've been talking about, right? How fast can you see what's going on? How fast can you reprioritize? How fast can you make a decision? How fast can you execute in that decision? Is your stock price going up? Is your revenue going up? Is your profitability going up? If the answer is no, you're not agile yet.
So I see a question here, and see others that say, how do you measure the time it takes to make a decision? And here's how you could really easily do it. Say, okay, here's the backlog item. We need to make a decision about this because we figured out that we need to make a decision. Throw it in the backlog. You put it in your backlog tool and just measure how many days it takes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
pretty
pretty simple. You know, it's
Yeah.
like, okay, it's a backlog item. We have to make a decision about this. All right.
Yeah. This is
And
not
then
rocket science. It's pretty easy to measure.
all right. Let me look at some others. So how different is Scrum at Scale from like, Scrum Scaled Agile or a product-driven, customer-focused organization? And we talked about, Rocket Mortgage, but I'll just say this about SAFe is, if SAFe works for you, that's great, but SAFe doesn't really go much beyond the product level. I mean, it's also really complicated, but, there's a lot of stuff in there. But what Scrum at Scale does is it's about the enterprise. And it's about how do you get, the whole enterprise to do it. And Scaled Agile doesn't really address that. Below that. So it does work as a cross release train, prioritization, which is what you need to do at the enterprise level.
I love the Rocket Mortgage case study because it actually was quite a successful SAFe implementation. They took tens of thousands of people. They made them go twice as fast with SAFe. So it's not about SAFe is bad. But then their question was, how do we accelerate further? And then they sent their technical managers came to Scrum at Scale, and then they became Scrum at Scale trainers. They spent a week with me becoming Scrum at Scale trainers. And then the managers went back. They implemented and ran the Meta Scrum and the executive action team. And they took that release time from a quarter down to a day within about 9 months. And so it just showed you what you can do both with Scrum at Scale, able to accelerate. They were able to do twice the work in half the time on top of what SAFe had already done, doubling production.
Yeah, and I would say
by getting the managers involved directly in the implementation.
Yeah, it's getting that leadership level, deciding at the leadership level, what are the priorities? Yeah. And I just think that's critically important. And someone's asking, how does this work? How does this look? And it's sort of in different ways. And your scale system is going to look different depending on what you're trying to do. Like if you're doing a music streaming service and making a mistake is pretty low cost versus, you're building, I don't know, a cruise missile, more mistakes cost is really high. The implementation is going to look pretty different.
Yeah, but there are some things that are the same. Like in the Rocket Mortgage case, we tried to write down all the things they did. First thing they did was they said, we have 15 specialized job titles. We're going to go to 3, Scrum Master, Product Owner, Team Member. Any specialist that doesn't want to work as a team member, they need to work in some other part of the company where we're not implementing Scrum at Scale. Then they said, Product Owner's job is to double revenue or double the value delivery. Scrum Master's job is to double the production, essentially drive the cost in half. And we're going to measure Product Owners and Scrum Master on their ability to do that. And then we're going to move the right people into those positions because not everybody is well suited to do that. And they said, we're not going to fire people. We're just going to move people around. We're going to get the people in the position of product owner that can double the value delivery. We're going to get the people in the Scrum Master position that can cut costs in half. And we're going to drive that delivery time from a quarter down to a day because that is the industry standard today. That's what Microsoft does. Amazon is even faster than that. every leading company today can deliver in a day, and most of our clients can't. That's a problem.
It really is. I'm just sort of looking for more questions. Is it, there's a couple of questions like, okay, what could you use the Cunethan framework to look at, different kinds of problems? You could, the WHJF, weighted, the weighted strength first kind of stuff. And those all work. Those are all good ways of looking at the world. But you want to measure is, and this is something you really got to think is, how do all of those things tie to business outcomes? How does that framework, whatever framework, you're using Kanban, you're using Lean, you're using Scrum, you're using, Safe, whatever it is, how is that driving business outcomes and organizational agility? And the best way I've seen to do it is this Scrum at scale, and the prioritization across the organization is just so important. The other part about which I was thinking about at Scrum at scale is, how do you get impediments coming up from the team level into whatever level they need to be able to fix it? And so I was working with this one group, pretty large company, and this guy said, okay, we want to set up this impediment removal chain. And somebody who's like, very, very senior in the organization got this impediment, that there was a parking problem at one of their facilities. And he was like, well, why is that coming up to like the executive vice president of the whole organization? And what he didn't realize was there was no other way. There was no one to talk to.
Yeah.
They could fix that problem. There was another.
Yeah. I've seen that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've seen that so often. I'm working with a senior management team. They have these impediments that float up. And I say to them, you have managers that should have fixed that before it ever got to you. You're not managing your managers. They are supposed to remove impediments. They're not. That is one of the biggest problems in enterprises. You talk to the managers, oh, I'm working 80 hours a week. What are you doing? They're doing stuff that doesn't enable teams to be more agile, produce faster, deliver value quicker. They're preoccupied with stuff that doesn't matter. That's why prioritization is so important from the top. And one of the best examples I saw of this, and John Deere in the early days, before the latest case study, we worked with their innovation centers, and the executive action team had a policy. If they didn't see an impediment come up to their level from a Scrum team in a 3-month period, the rule was they changed the Scrum Master. And this had a ripple effect across the whole organization, because all the middle management in that chain now realized that their organization was going to be changed by senior management if they didn't do their job. Okay, so I strongly recommend any of you who are senior managers out there who have executive action teams, you need to put some procedures and ways of working in place that guarantee that impediments flow up. And if they don't flow up, there's action that impacts the middle management that causes them to change their behavior and actually start helping the teams be more agile.
Yeah, then there was a question there, like, how do you transform, this is the classic question, how do you get a company from waterfall to Scrum at scale? And they want to say, without making a huge investment. And there's a couple different ways to do that. And there's some on-demand stuff you can try that's a lot cheaper than hiring a bunch of consultants. We have the Scrum at scale on-demand thing. I'm sure there's others out there, but that's one way you can do it. The real thing is, like, just tell your leaders, let's try an experiment. How about we experiment with this one group of teams and set it up in a Scrum at scale way and see what happens? But really do it by the book. Don't mess with it. And let's do it for, 3 months. And see what happens. And if it doesn't improve stuff, we know now, or raises impediments, or do that. But low cost, you don't want to, get an on-demand solution. There's, a couple of us, we just released one. And so I would recommend you try that. But the most important thing is just to try and experiment and to see what happens. That's the most agile thing ever.
Yeah. What you're describing is what I always do. I go in, I say, okay, you got hundreds of teams. We're not going to worry about them right now. We're going to worry about 6 teams. For the price of 6 teams, doubling, tripling, quadrupling their production, that's rounding error in your supply budget. But what it will do is it will create a model. Once it's successful, will do whatever it needs to happen within your organization to get 6 teams successful. Once we do that, we have a personalized model for your organization to do it. And Schlumberger, a big oil company, the CIO came to me after 3 months of just getting those few teams up, and he said, Jeff, you saved me $30 million. I said, well, if you invested a little more money, we could have saved you a lot more than that in 3 months. But 30 million is a nice pocket change. This is not expensive. This requires clear thinking, rapid execution on a small scale. That's the way you scale. You start small, get that right, and you only scale what works. You don't try to scale what you know doesn't work or you don't know works.
I think we're gonna wrap it now with one more question that somebody asked. I think we were talking about it a little bit. And I think this goes back to the beginning. It says, how do we show? And Peter Fischbach, who's works with us, works with Scrum Inc, a lot, friend of Scrum Inc. Hi, Peter. Sort of said, we have to come up with ways to show that agile coaches and Scrum Masters drive value.
Right.
And I had a conversation 2 months ago with a big company, and he says, listen, I have like 3,000 Scrum Masters. That's costing me like $100 million a year, something like that. And he said, my management is going, what's the value? And he says, and I know that the value is there, but the reason is that the Scrum Masters and the Agile operation isn't linking what they're doing to business value.
Right.
Because that's what leadership is looking at. In a tricky, business environment, they're going to say, well, why don't we just cut all these Scrum Masters? Because that just seems like a cost center to me. And I could totally make sense, right? That's totally legitimate. Right. But so unless you have what you're doing as an Agilist, showing how you're impacting the business outcomes, whether it's ROI, if you're in a corporate, you can measure them at different, whatever value is for you. But if you don't have that connection, they're just going to see you as cost rather than, as Jeff was saying, an accelerant that's cheap to have. And with that, I think we'll wrap it. As we said at the beginning, this has been recorded. This will be distributed. You'll get an email all about it. And happy holidays to everyone who celebrates them in this time of year. And as you wrap up this year and think about what you're going to be doing next year, think about how you're going to organize your organization in an agile way to take advantage of all the change that's going to happen next year. So with that, thanks a lot. Talk to you all soon.